delighted to be here actually and spend some time with you, sharing just some of my thoughts and approaches on email marketing. Because I've spent the last 20 years working in retail, and over half of that working in the area of email marketing, CRM and loyalty. And during that time, both myself and email marketing have gone through kind of a number of key turning points, really, which have started to influence and shape how I approach marketing through this channel and how I view its role within the total marketing mix. And I think when I was asked to speak today, I thought, well, actually, what I enjoy doing is kind of dispelling some of those myths about what makes this channel successful and what we should be focusing on when we work in this space. Because it might not be the sexiest, most innovative channel, and it might not be at the forefront of technology, but it's what most businesses start with. And far from thinking that this channel is dead, I actually believe that it will continue to serve as that foundation layer for contact strategy for many years to come. So we need to get it right, but we have to innovate within it to keep it performing. And because let's face it, we can all have a tendency to play it safe in this channel. It becomes the workhorse. It becomes the thing that we always rely on to communicate absolutely everything about the business. And we avoid taking any risk or implementing change in this channel because we just need it to do what it does. So I'll spend some time today talking about why I believe that what we've all been told to focus on in this channel is not as important as everyone thinks, and how we can challenge ourselves to think differently. And that whilst we wouldn't ignore any of these metrics because they are absolutely indicators of how well it's performing, we do need to consider their relative importance amongst other things within our business and how we might implement change through this channel to keep it alive and exciting. Because we need to. We need to attract and hire the best skills in order to radically improve and lead our customer contact strategy. So I'll talk for a little while, and if you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them in the chat box for me. I'll do my best to remember to look, and there will be opportunity at the end to either speak to me directly or to answer questions on this session. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's start here. Less than 5 years ago, I started a role in a retail business where the brief was to grow the participation of email marketing and grow customer retention. Simple, right? And within the first few hours of being in that role, I'd been told that the email strategy was very simple. It was that we send to engage contacts on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, and on a Sunday. And on a Tuesday, we send something about new in. And on a Thursday, we send something about promotions. And on a Sunday, we send something less salesy that the design team like. And we send at 11 o'clock because we've run tests on this. And those days at that time are where we get the best open rate. Wow. I mean, this was a really well ingrained hypothesis within the business. Everybody knew about it. Everybody knew that an email would go out on a Tuesday, a Thursday, and a Sunday. And so when I was tasked with improving the performance of this channel and actually moving the needle, it was really important that I got under the skin of why this was happening and why we would be accepting that to change a strategy, we would be so rigid in how we were measuring the success of it. Because actually, when what we're talking about here is communicating to customers, people. And so we can't apply hard and fast rules that we think apply for everybody. And believing that there's some sort of industry standard that we all have to set is just kind of missing the point. Now, of course, we can optimize and we can understand how those things influence the overall performance of the channel, but we need to be much more fluid about how we approach this. Because first and foremost, whatever marketing you're talking about, whether it's email or any other channel, has to be rooted in what you know about your business and your customer. It's about your business rhythm, the rhythm of how you operate, what you do, the part you play in people's lives, and how you do that. And if you understand this, if you really get this and you spend the time listening to customers and observing what they do through your data, but also through interactions on your site, you will start to improve the way that you choose when is best to send an email. And very often the answer is simple. It's when you have something of value to say. And for some businesses, that will mean that you only have something a few times every month. But for other businesses, it might be almost every day. There's no right and wrong here. But getting that idea embedded into your strategy is a crucial step. There's little point pulling against the tide if you have a lot of messages, and you need to increase the frequency of your send. But equally, it doesn't mean that if you have a lot to say, it warrants sending something every day. You've got to really think about, what am I doing? What's my role? How do my customers respond? And am I doing the best? Am I making the best decisions in that place? And of course, sending with a high frequency makes it easier to spread that content, because actually you've got lots of opportunities in the week or in the month to talk about the things that you want to get across. But it might be harder to improve conversion rate, because people aren't going to convert every time they receive something if they're receiving something every day. But on the flip side, of course, sending with low frequency might mean that you have to work harder to decide which messages you include in each communication. And whilst you might see a better engagement rate, you might struggle to maintain that engagement rate over time. So just really get to know your business and how you want to use this channel and the part that this channel plays in your customers' lives. Now, I'm not here today to say that it's all about instinct and not about insight, because actually I believe that the two need to happen in a very mutual way. It can't all be gut feel. It can't all be about, well, I understand my business, I understand my customers. But what you can do is you can use that insight to validate some of those hypotheses within your business or dispute them. And equally, you can use that insight, that instinct, that knowledge about how your business operates, that knowledge about your customers, to make the insight that you have relatable, to tell stories and make it something that people can conceptualize in their head. My clear message here is that, above thinking about when is the best send time to send this email, consider how you might use engagement filters. Consider how you might use the knowledge and the behaviors of your customers to inform and influence when is best to send. Now, there are options like optimization of send time, so that you can be in the inbox at the right time of day for each individual customer. And sometimes that's available to you and sometimes it's not. But I think what's most important is that you step away from thinking that there is this industry standard. That's what I have to do because that's going to give me the best results, and start really looking at when do your customers interact with you? When is the most appropriate time to communicate what you've got to say? And what tools do you have to make sure that you're in the right place at the right time for each individual customer? Next slide, please. And then there's this one. So this is the data on which all CRM strategies are founded, right? And I will say that, I'm not here to rubbish this, because in many cases, a last order date, the last indicator that somebody interacted with your brand, is maybe all you have. And so that's okay. Because for many businesses, for many organizations of varying sizes, that is all that they have. But what I would encourage you to do is start thinking about what else could you bring to that piece of data or that insight to help you make your contact strategy and your targeting strategy more informed. We have to start with where we are, because otherwise, what's the alternative? But what I will say is that if you are here and your retention strategy is based on waiting for people to stop doing things before you intervene, really start to think about how you could change that. This will often mean re-looking at some of the measures that you use, because, every financial team and every reporting team within a business will want to say to you that retention is all about repeat order rate. But actually, retention is about much more than that. It's about a stepping stone towards making your customers loyal to you. And so there are many things that will indicate to you that you are retaining those customers, as well as them placing an order. So this can be something that's really hard to do. But I've worked in businesses where customers who had a really high spend value with the brand we're just as likely to shop with the competitor. And high spend with us usually just meant high spend within the market. So we've got to be really careful that we're not using this metric to define all of our contact strategy and all of our measures of success, because actually it might be indicating something quite different to what we think it is. And let's face it, we're no longer in a place where we have to wait for customers to stop doing things before we encourage them back. Retention is not only about that placing an order, it's also about making people feel like they want to choose you next time, that they've had a great experience with you, that they want to encourage other people to shop with you, and that they enjoy that experience and they want more of it. We should also be trying to identify the people that we want to come back and be confident enough as a brand to leave the others to go. Not everybody that comes to your site or your store needs to be somebody that you nurture back and retain. And of course, we should be looking for small micro conversions between orders, because order rate is not something that is very, very high in most retail businesses. And so we need to look at little indicators between those orders that show us that this customer is still interested, still engaged with us, still responding to what we do. And I call those micro conversions because they're little wins along the way. They're things like, have they signed up to your app? Have they adopted a new channel? Have they responded to you when you've done a competition or something a lot softer? Have they recommended you to somebody that they know? All of those things are clear indicators to you as a business that they like you. And so keep going with it. And then ultimately they'll place an order again. And then finally, with regard to incentivizing, make sure that you're incentivizing the right people. I've been, predominantly involved in businesses where promotions and offers and deals were the bread and butter of what we did. And most customers expect it at some point. But make sure that if you're parting with your margin, if you're using incentives to drive customers back, that you really understand who needs those incentives to come back and why you want that customer to come back and why an incentive is the right thing. Because otherwise, what tends to happen is you either think that the promotion hasn't worked because you've had a low response rate, or alternatively, you're eroding margin on people who would have shopped anyway. Next slide, please. So this is always the question, right? So if I'm stood here saying we need to change how we use email marketing and we need to change the performance indicators that we use, then most people say to me, okay, so what should I be using? And I think for me, it's not about getting rid of metrics that have a long history and are really well understood within teams. It's simply about looking wider, looking at things that influence our results rather than what is the measure and am I getting the right result there? So where I start is thinking about, am I in good shape to send? And this all really boils down to data capture, data validations, and the overall health of your contact list. Because if you're not taking the time to do that, if you're just simply focused on numbers and volume and increase, and you're not actually looking at how well am I capturing this data? Is it useful data to me? And am I doing all of the things to keep those people healthy, engaged, active contacts? Then really you're just kind of filling an empty bucket. Now, this isn't about making it easier for you as a business and harder for the customer, because obviously what we know is that there's always a barrier to sharing data with you. So we need to make it easy for customers. But I suppose what I'm looking for here is the quality, the timing, the relevance, and the context of when you ask for this data. Because everybody wants it at the checkout. And of course, there's only so many things that you can do in a checkout. And your UX teams will be making sure that, the first and foremost, you're getting customers through the checkout and placing the order. So think outside of that. Think outside of that journey on site when people are placing an order, and think about what other opportunities you have to capture good quality, high value data and communicate to your customers about how you're going to use it to improve the experience that they have. And this actually might go against the grain a little bit, because it might be that you have to do that as follow-up rather than the first thing that you do as soon as somebody arrives on site. But again, this really comes down to what you know about your customers, how they spend time on your site, and how you want to interact with them as a brand. So be patient, but equally be rigorous. Your UX team will have spent a long number of hours making sure that their product pages, their category pages, their checkout process is as smooth and slick as possible. And if you're in charge of an email marketing database, then you should be giving it exactly that level of attention. So work with them and see what things you can learn from them about how to improve that experience for your customer, but also improve the result that you get. And then secondly, how well do you know your audience? Very often we spend a very small amount of time looking at who we are going to communicate to versus what we are going to tell them. And I would argue that really designing your audience, defining who you're going to speak to, should be almost, at least a kind of a good half to a quarter of the time and investment and attention that you give to planning your campaign. You might want to look at things like programs to enrich that data over time. So really focus on that onboarding process. You've got an email contact, you now want to get to know them and you want them to get to know you. So use programs and really kind of make sure that you're starting to add to your data so that you can use that to inform the audiences. And obviously then making sure that the content is relevant. So we talk about content relevancy and we try to, I don't think there's an email team that wouldn't try and make the content relevant to them. But very often what we find is that we're making it relevant to what we want to say as a business rather than what that customer wants to hear. And that's what I mean about making sure that you're spending time looking at who is this going to? Am I saying the stuff that's important to them? And as a result, are they going to do something about it? And that kind of comes on to, will they care? If you look honestly and critically at who you're going to send that communication to, and you look at what it's talking about, will those people actually care about what you've got to say? Does it add some value into their life? If you were one of those customers, if you were in that audience, would this message mean something to you? Would it resonate to you? And I don't need, because, we talk about retargeting, and it gets a bad press sometimes that we're following up with people who've been on site and abandoned a bag or abandoned a browse session. And the point here is that I probably don't need to be reminded of what I looked at when I was on your site, because I can remember that. But what might be nice is to receive a little bit more information to help me with that decision making. And what happens then is that the customers do care much more about what you sent, because it doesn't matter so much as to whether they liked what they browsed or they didn't like what they browsed, because what you're doing is just adding some value and some information and some enrichment into how you talk to your customers about the things that they've browsed. Adding value into people's life doesn't start and stop with promotions and discounts. I mentioned before that I've worked in industries where this has been very much part of what we do. But I really believe that this channel has an opportunity to talk to people about much more than that. We all want to achieve, that kind of level of communication and that relationship with customers where they're not relying on receiving an offer or a discount to make a purchase. So think about things like reminders or tips, suggestions, recommendations, reviews, things that actually go that extra distance to help customers live their life, make decisions, and get the things that make it easier for them. Because ultimately that starts to drive that retention and that reliance on you as a brand, and ultimately love. And then finally, what do I want them to do as a result? So this, when I think about this, I think, making sure that we've got the right content, making sure that we're sending content that adds value to the right people. This is also one of the key foundations that needs to be in place. It's about making sure that when I've sent this, I know what the customer needs to do, or I know what I would want the customer to do. Now, very often, call to actions are shop now. because when you ask teams what you want people to do as a result of receiving this email, they want them to place an order. And of course, we all do, that's what pays the bills. But what's important here is that we understand that this is about a sequence of communications. It's not about the silver bullet. So let's learn from things like social media, where it's actually more about engagement, more about a conversation, more about building a relationship, and start feeding that data capture into what we do. So rather than thinking, I'm going to send this email and this absolutely needs to result in a conversion, think about those micro conversions. If I send an email and the next best action from that customer is that they simply open it and click through to site and I receive a visit, great, job well done. If it's that actually we want them to adopt a new channel, like our new app or SMS marketing or whatever else it might be, then, if we achieve that, then that's a good result. So let's step away from thinking that all emails need to result in a conversion or else it's a poor delivery. Next slide. And so I also believe that we can't speak of improving performance and what's important in email marketing without talking about the changes that I believe are needed in the team who work in and around email marketing. Because our success relies on this, and I've taken a number of teams through quite radical changes in how we approach email marketing. And in some situations, I've got it wrong, and in some situations, I've got it a bit better. But what I know is that we have to support them to innovate and bring change to this channel. Because otherwise, we're never going to achieve the change that we need to happen. But we can't underestimate it because it's big culture change. Very often, email marketing teams are built up of people who are careful, high degrees of accuracy, attention to detail. They don't really like taking risk. They want order, they want clarity, they want control. And those are all the skills that we want in those people, because that's what makes those campaigns work, and it's what makes them go out with no mistakes and with a high degree of accuracy and engagement. So we don't want to erode that, but we do want to encourage that idea that it's okay to take risk. But we have to do that by nurturing those people to that place. A significant move within your team and organisation is when you start to structure teams around customer rather than channel. And this was the big shift for me. It was about starting to say, we're no longer going to hold you to task on the results and the performance of this individual channel on a weekly basis. We're going to start looking at how effective we are at retaining customers and how effective we are at improving the experience that our customers have with us. And as a result, once you start to structure your teams around customer and you use their knowledge and their skill set from those channels and get those channels working together, it becomes a much smoother, elegant, more happy experience for the customer overall. We also want to make sure that we're organising our teams around data and technology, because very often we can live in worlds where the data and how we organise data is the problem of a different team, a different area of the business who preside over things like that but never actually use it. And in order for this to be successful, we have to do what I call data democratization, or removing all those barriers to data. We need to make it something that email teams and across the marketing team, they have access to it, and they have access to it at an equal level. So we no longer have to take tickets and wait in line for somebody in the insight team to create something for us. We're actually able to influence that ourselves and actually get to that data ourselves. And then speaking about technology will inevitably be something that at some point you look at, because actually in order to make this stuff happen, very often you need to make investments in this space. But what I would say is, before you go off and look at what's the best that I can get for my budget, or who's the industry leader, or who does this really well, or what other companies do I know who have used these platforms, really start to think and work with your teams to understand what is it that you want to do tomorrow or next week or the month after that you can't do today. And when you look at technology, are you looking for technology that can help you with that? Because very often we can get into a place where we want to make that investment in technology, and we want to get that technology right so that the teams are able to do stuff, because that technology, that investment, that ability to make stuff happen and make strategy happen is important, right? But if we get the wrong technology, what we can find is that we still can't do the things that we wanted to do. The frustration within the team increases, and actually we've made an investment in something that's actually not really moved us on. So it's about really understanding what your requirements are and going small to begin with, focusing on some things very, very specific that would make a big difference in your business today, and getting the right technology in place to help you with that. And then finally, mindset. So all of these things, so making sure that data is available, that technology is in place, and that the business is ready for this change, are all important. And it's because if we don't actually change our teams culturally, if we don't change how we approach things, if we don't make that investment in opening their eyes to what is possible, then actually they just feel like there's lots of change happening around them. So we need to make sure that as a team and an organisation, we're ready to have those difficult conversations. We're ready to talk to people about not what's simple or easy to do, but what will make a big difference. And that difference might be to your customer, or it might be to your team, or it might be to your business. But we've got to start focusing on those things rather than what we would like to do or what's easy to do. It will depend, I realise that, on how big an organisation you work in. And I always say that the changes that you make, the investments that you make, the approaches that you adopt really depend on where you are today and where you want to get to. You can have the most creative, fantastic execution, but if you can't target, most people won't hear you. And if you can get all the right people to the site, but if the on-site experience is poor, they'll drop out. And you might get the right incentive to the right people at the right time to drive conversion. But if the after sales is poor, or if the after sales is lacking, they won't come back. And so it's getting into that place where you understand that it's about the total business pulling together, striving towards what you want to achieve, that's important. And I think that regardless of the size of your organisation, that's something that is possible to do. Next slide, please. And so today I wanted to leave you with a couple of things to think about and speak with other people about, either today or when you get back with your teams. And that's really about what single thing could you do tomorrow that would start to contribute to the way that your teams think about email marketing in a different way. How can you put something in place that will help them realise what the potential of this channel is beyond open rate and click rate? And secondly, what can you do maybe in the next month to make sure that those things are starting to be put into action? Identifying what it is that you would need to be able to make this come to life and to actually execute it. And then start working with your teams to make that happen.